that is in your 10th class lesson, biology. Okay, in reproduction. Here we need to know the definition of reproduction. What is reproduction? The process of production of new organisms of the same kind. If a mango plant gives birth to another mango plant, and a dog gives birth to kitten, and human beings give birth to a baby, like the different organisms give birth in respect of the species. That process is called as reproduction. Here reproduction is of two types, sexual and asexual. In the sexual reproduction, fusion of gametes takes place. Here fusion of gametes takes place and two organisms may involve. And in asexual mode of reproduction, only one organism involved and there is no fusion of gametes. Okay, then what are gametes, how that fusion takes place, everything we will discuss in this class. Okay, for this sexual reproduction, you people need to study the flower first. What are the different parts of a flower? Why we need to study about the flower? Because the flower is the sexual part of the plant. In the entire plant body, all parts except the flower are called as vegetative parts. But the flower is called as sexual part of the plant. Why we are calling only flower as the sexual part? Because it contains the sexual parts as like animals. How like animals contain male and female reproductive parts, in the same manner, a flower also contains male and female reproductive parts. Then let's have a look on this structure of a flower. If you observe the structure of flower, it contains 4 layers. The first layer, what you people are seeing green in color, it is called as calyx. Calyx, it just gives protection to the flower. It is giving protection to the flower. And the next layer is called as corolla. What we are seeing bright red in color, these are also called as petals, and these green color parts also called as sepals. Sepals or calyx, petals or corolla. And what is the function of this corolla? By having different colors and some nice fragrance, it just attracts some insects for the process of pollination. What is pollination? We will discuss later. Okay, the first layer is calyx, this one, and the second layer is called as corolla, this one, and the third layer, what is the important layer? Fourth and third layers are important. Here the third one is called as androecium. Androecium, it is the male reproductive part of a flower. Male reproductive part of a flower. And this full part is called as androecium. The androecium contains 2 important parts. This one is called as filament and this one is called as anther. What is this part? Anther. And this part is called as filament. These 2 parts together called as androecium. Androecium is the male part of the flower. Male reproductive part of the flower. If we talk about the 4th layer, that is called as gynoecium. From here to here, we are calling this middle central part as gynoecium. This gynoecium contains 3 important parts. This is the ovary, and this one, tube-like one, is called as style, and this one is called as the stigma. Stigma, style and ovary. These 3 parts together called as gynoecium. Gynoecium is the female part of the flower. Okay, like this, some flowers, they contain both male and female reproductive parts. Such kind of plants are called as bisexual flowers because they contain both the sexual parts, male and female, in only one flower. Such kind of flowers are called as bisexual flowers. And some flowers contain only either androecium or gynoecium, either male part or female part. Such kind of flowers are called as unisexual flowers. Bisexual flowers means they contain two varieties of reproductive system, androecium and gynoecium. But unisexual flowers contain only either androecium or gynoecium. And it is very important to know about the process of pollination. The transfer of pollen grains, and you need to know it is the filament and this one is the anther. These two parts together called as androecium. Anther able to produce a powdery substance. Whenever we touch the anther, then we find a powdery substance in different colors. Some flowers may contain white, some may yellow, like that it may vary. That powdery grains are called as pollen grains. Those are the male gametes. What we are calling here, we may find some powdery substance. Each particle is called as pollen grain, and this is the male gamete. Whenever this male gamete reaches the female gamete present in the ovary, then that process is called as fertilization. The transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma is called as pollination. The process of transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma is called as pollination. And here you people know what is pollination. If the pollen grains of the same flower reaches the same flower stigma, ఒక ఫ్లవర్ లో ఉన్న pollen grains అదే ఫ్లవర్ లో ఉన్న స్టిగ్మా ని రీచ్ అయితే such kind of pollination is called as self pollination. Same flower lo unna pollen grains same flower lo unna stigma ni reach aithe self pollination. Whenever the pollen grains of one flower reaches the stigma of another flower, one flower to another flower, then such kind of pollination is called as cross pollination. If it reaches another flower, then it is called as cross pollination. Self means in the same flower pollination takes place. Cross means in different flowers the pollination takes place. Okay, and here you people need to know about the structure of ovule. Structure of ovule. This is the structure of ovule, and it is the female part. This part is the female part. Here what we are seeing, this part, we need to know about that before going to start the sexual reproduction. That is the process of fertilization. Pollination completed. Now we are going to the process of fertilization. Before that you need to have an idea on structure of ovule. Here, whenever you see a ovule structure, the ovule may contain a small egg-shaped sac-like structure in the center. That is called as embryo sac. That embryo sac is also called as female gametophyte. Female gametophyte. Okay, and this female gametophyte may contain 7 cells and 8 nuclei. 8 nuclei. 7 cells. See here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 cells and 8 nucleus. Here 1 nuclei, 1 nuclei, 1 nuclei, 3 nucleus. 3 plus 3, 6. Here the middle cell, central cell contain 2 nuclei. 3, 3, 6 and 6 plus 2, 8. 7 cells and contain 8 nuclei. It is very important. You need to remember the embryonic sac. Embryo sac contains 7 cells and 8 nuclei. Okay, now these 3 we are calling as antipodals. The 3 cells which are present on the above side of the embryo sac is called as antipodals. And the down 3 cells, in these 3, the middle one is called as egg cell. And these 2 which are supporting the egg cell are called as synergids or helping cells. They help in the process of fertilization. That's why they are called as synergids. and the middle cell which is present in the center of embryo sac is called as central cell. Central cell. Okay, if you observe, the embryo sac is surrounded by some layers, and those layers are called as integuments. These layers are called as integuments. The number of integuments may vary from one species of plants to another species of plants. Okay, here you need to remember integuments towards the side of the egg cell, they just leave a small gap, but on the above side there is no gap. Where the egg cell is located, there the integument layers, they just allow a small microscopic place, and that place is called as micropyle. What we are calling micropyle. And here the ovule is just attached to the ovary by the help of a stalk-like structure called as funiculus. Funiculus. What we are calling funiculus. The stalk-like structure which connects the ovule to the ovary. Ovule to the ovary. Number of ovules may vary from one plant to another plant. Some may contain only 1, 2, 3, 100, thousands. Like the different number of ovules may present in different plants depending on their species. Okay, like this the structure of ovule occurs. Here this is the egg cell and these are the synergids, and middle one is called as central cell. It contains 2 nuclei, and the above 3 cells are called as antipodals. Okay, then after seeing the structure of ovule, you get one idea what is the inner cells called as, what are the functions. Now it is the time to discuss about the process of fertilization, and we already discussed about pollination, the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma. Whenever the pollen grain reaches the stigma, you just imagine it is the stigma. Pollen grain, whenever it reaches the stigma contains a sticky sugary substance on its surface. Here a sticky sugary substance is present. By its sticky nature, the pollen grain just attached to the stigma, and that sugary substance make the pollen grain to germinate. Whenever the pollen grain fall on the stigma, then the pollen grain start germinating. By that germination, the pollen grain start developing a tube, pollen tube. That tube is called as pollen tube. And the pollen grain contains 2 male nuclei. 2 male nuclei. Now that nuclei pass through that pollen tube. Pollen grain germinates and forms a pollen tube. This tube contains 2 nuclei. Okay, 2 nuclei. Whenever the pollen tube reaches this place, micropyle, reaches the micropyle and enters into the embryonic sac. It just enters into the embryonic sac. After entering into the embryonic sac, the tube, the end of the tube, it just rupture. Here it may rupture. After rupture, the 2 male nuclei enter into the embryo sac. After entering into the embryo sac, 1 male nuclei fuses with the egg cell. 1 male nuclei fuses with the egg cell. That is called as fertilization. Whenever the male nuclei fuses with the egg cell, that process is called as fertilization. That is first fertilization. And another nuclei is present. That another nuclei combines with this central cell. During the fusion of egg cell with male nuclei, the 2 nuclei present in the central cell, fuse together to form secondary nuclei. Okay, ikkada male nuclei vachi egg cell tho fertilization చేస్తున్నప్పుడు సెంట్రల్ సెల్లో ఉన్న 2 న్యూక్లియస్ ఫ్యూజ్ అయిపోతాయి. ఆ ఫ్యూజ్ అయిపోయి సెకండరీ న్యూక్లియైని ఫామ్ చేస్తాయి. సెకండరీ న్యూక్లియై ఫామ్ అయిన తర్వాత మనకి పోలన్ గ్రెయిన్ నుంచి వచ్చిన సెకండ్ మేల్ న్యూక్లియస్ అనేది ఈ సెకండరీ న్యూక్లియస్ తో కంబైన్డ్ అవుతుంది. And this process is called as second fertilization. It is the first fertilization and here the second fertilization takes place. It is the special feature of all flowering plants. Only plants lone manam double fertilization ane word vintam. We people are able to listen double fertilization only in the sexual reproduction of the flowers. Double fertilization and triple fusion. What is meant by triple fusion? Fusion of egg cell nuclei and male nuclei. One fusion. Fusion of the two nuclei present in the central cell. Second fusion. And the fusion of central nucleus with the second male nuclei. Triple fusion. Double fertilization and triple fusion takes place in the flowering plants during the process of sexual reproduction. It is very important point. And here, like this fertilization takes place. After fertilization, the egg develops to form zygote. Egg cell forms the zygote and the secondary nucleus or the central cell develops to form endosperm. Endosperm stores food for the development of the zygote. It just stores food for the development of the zygote. And these two synergids help the egg cell during fertilization. And antipodals, they should not give any help while fertilization, but they supply some foodie substances to this endosperm for later development of the young plant in the form of zygote. Like this, fertilization occurs inside the flower. It is very interesting if you listen carefully. I think today you learned